The morning sun spilled over the rolling hills of my farm, casting golden streaks across the dew-soaked grass. It was the kind of quiet that only a rural life could offer, peaceful, unbroken, save for the occasional cluck of a hen or the distant moo of a cow. I stood on the porch, a steaming mug of coffee in hand, breathing in the crisp air. My farm wasn't much to look at by city standards, just a modest patch of land with a weathered barn, a scattering of livestock, and a rickety fence that had seen better days, but it was mine, and it was home. That morning, though, the tranquility shattered like glass under a hammer. I heard her before I saw her, a high-pitched wail slicing through the stillness, sharp enough to make my ears ring. I squinted across the field, and there she was, Lisa, my insufferable neighbor, sprinting like her life depended on it. Her arms flailed wildly, her designer purse swinging like a pendulum gone rogue, and her screams hit a pitch I didn't know humans could reach. Behind her, hot on her heels, was Max, my guard Goose, charging like a feathered freight train, honking with the ferocity of a war horn. His little black eyes gleamed with purpose, locked onto Lisa like she was the sole threat to his kingdom. I set my mug down on the porch railing, crossed my arms, and watched the chaos unfold. Lisa stumbled, her fancy heels sinking into the soft earth, but she didn't dare stop. Max was gaining ground, his wings flared out, his neck stretched forward as if he'd been training for this moment his whole life. It was a sight to behold, pure, unfiltered justice playing out in real time. But to understand how we got here, I need to take you back a bit. Because this wasn't just a random chase. This was the culmination of weeks of tension, a showdown between a meddling busybody and the fiercest protector my farm had ever known. My name's Tom Carver, and I've been running this farm for the better part of a decade. It's not a big operation, just enough to keep me busy and the animals fed. There's Daisy, my old border collie who spends most of her days napping in the sun, a handful of cows that chew cud like it's their life's mission, some sheep with wool so patchy they look like they've been to a bad barber, and a flock of chickens that cluck and strut like they own the place. It's a simple life, and I like it that way. The air's clean, the work's honest, and the only real drama comes from deciding who gets breakfast first, the goats or the hens. That is, until Lisa moved in next door. If you've never had the misfortune of meeting someone like Lisa, let me give you the rundown. She's the type who'd complain about the sky being too blue or the breeze daring to muss her hair. Picture a woman with a permanent scowl, a voice that could curdle milk, and an unshakable belief that she's the ultimate authority on everything. Now arm her with a clipboard and a superiority complex, and you've got Lisa Delaney in a nutshell. She rolled into the neighborhood about 6 months ago, fresh from some suburban cul-de-sac, and decided my farm was her personal crusade. It all started innocently enough, or as innocently as anything involving Lisa could. One morning, I was out mending a fence when I saw her strutting across the field, her nose in the air like she was royalty inspecting the peasantry. She stopped at the edge of my property, peering over the fence with a look that could have soured honey. "Good morning, Mr. Carver," she called, her tone dripping with condescension. "I hope you don't mind, but I need to conduct an inspection." I paused, hammer in hand, and wiped the sweat from my brow. "An inspection? Of my farm?" She nodded, flipping open her clipboard to reveal a list of scribbled notes. "Exactly. I've received complaints." I raised an eyebrow, leaning on the fence post. "Complaints? From who?" She faltered for half a second, just long enough for me to know she was making it up. "From concerned members of the community," she said, recovering with a dramatic flourish. "Uh-huh," I replied, unconvinced. "And by community, you mean yourself?" Lisa ignored me, her pen already darting across the page as she pointed at random things. "Your rooster crows too early. It's disruptive. And those cows, they look unnaturally large. Are you overfeeding them? Oh, and the sheep, their wool is all uneven. That can't be healthy." I stared at her, trying to figure out if she was serious or just bored enough to invent problems. "Lisa, that's how wool grows. It's not supposed to look like a barber trimmed it." She waved me off, undeterred, and marched toward the chicken coop like she had every right to be there. I stepped in front of her, blocking her path. "You're not going in there." She scoffed, tossing her head back. "I have rights." "You don't have rights on my property," I shot back. "This is private land. You want to poke around? You need a warrant or an invitation, and you're not getting either. Lisa huffed, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the clipboard. If you have nothing to hide, you shouldn't mind a little inspection. I opened my mouth to tell her to take her nosy self back home, but before I could, I caught a flicker of movement out of the corner of my eye. A shadow shifted near the barn, silent and swift, and I knew what was coming. Lisa had just made the worst mistake of her life. She'd stepped too far into Max's territory. Now, let me tell you about Max. He's not your average goose. I got him as a gosling a few years back, figuring he'd be a quirky addition to the farm. But Max didn't grow up to be some waddling, honking nuisance. No, he evolved into something else entirely, a feathered sentinel with a vendetta against anyone who didn't belong. The mailman refuses to deliver packages if Max is anywhere near the gate. The neighbor's terrier won't even glance at my fence anymore. Max isn't just a goose. He's a legend, a one-bird security system with an instinct for trouble and a honk that could wake the dead. That morning, as Lisa took one more defiant step forward, Max decided her time was up. He erupted from his perch near the barn with a battle cry that rattled the air, wings spread wide, neck low and menacing. Lisa froze, her brain short-circuiting as she registered the threat barreling toward her. She let out a noise, a cross between a gasp and a scream, then spun on her heel and bolted. But Max was faster. He charged after her, honking like a possessed foghorn, his webbed feet pounding the dirt. Lisa's arms flailed, her purse swinging wildly as she ran. She tripped once, her heels catching in the grass, but scrambled back up, shrieking like she was being hunted by a pack of wolves. Max nipped at her ankles, forcing her to leap over a puddle in a move that would have impressed an Olympic coach. She was a blur of panic and expensive fabric, and I couldn't help but grin. The pigs lined up along the fence to watch, their snouts poking through the slats like they were at a show. The chickens clucked excitedly, and even Daisy lifted her head from her nap, her tail wagging lazily. It was the most entertainment the farm had seen in years. Lisa finally reached the gate, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she fumbled with the latch. She yanked it open, dove through, and slammed it shut just as Max skidded to a stop, inches from the metal. He let out one final, triumphant honk, his chest puffed out like a conquering hero. You. Lisa sputtered, clutching her chest as she glared at me through the bars. That thing is dangerous. I could have been killed. I shrugged, strolling over to the gate. Max doesn't like trespassers. This isn't over, she screeched, pointing a trembling finger at me. I'm reporting you. You'll hear from the authorities. I tipped my hat with a smirk. Good luck with that. She stormed off, her muddy heels clicking against the gravel road, and I turned to Max. He strutted back toward me, head held high, as if he knew he'd just won a war. I knelt down, offering him a handful of cracked corn. Good job, buddy. He honked once, snatched the snack, and waddled off, already scanning the horizon for his next target. As I watched Lisa disappear into the distance, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. She wasn't the type to let a goose get the last word. And knowing her, she'd be back, with a vengeance. Lisa didn't waste time licking her wounds. Less than a day after Max chased her off the farm, she was back, standing at my front gate like a general ready to storm a castle. Her smug grin was plastered across her face, and in her hands, she clutched that infamous clipboard like a weapon. This time, though, she wasn't alone. A white truck idled on the roadside, and a man in a navy blue uniform leaned against it, arms crossed, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. The words animal control were stitched across his chest. I stepped off the porch, already feeling a headache brewing. Morning, Lisa, I said, keeping my tone even. Couldn't stay away, huh? She ignored me, turning to the officer with a dramatic wave. This is the place, Officer Daniels. I told you about the dangerous conditions here. The officer straightened up, giving me a curt nod. Afternoon, sir. I'm here to investigate a complaint about potential neglect and unsafe conditions for your animals. I shot a glance at Lisa, who stood there with her chin tilted up like she'd already won. Let me guess. This complaint came from her? Daniels shifted uncomfortably, but before he could answer, Lisa jumped in. It doesn't matter who filed it, she snapped, waving a dismissive hand. What matters is that I witnessed multiple infractions. That goose alone is a public safety hazard. At the sound of his name, Max tilted his head from where he stood near the barn. He let out a slow, deliberate honk, and I swear I saw Daniels flinch. Lisa took a step back, her bravado faltering for a split second. I bit back a laugh. "Look," Daniels said, clearing his throat. "I just need to do a quick walkthrough, check on the animals. If everything's fine, I'll be out of your hair." I had nothing to hide, so I shrugged and pushed the gate open. "Fine by me. Just watch out for Max. He takes his job seriously." Lisa huffed, clutching her clipboard tighter. "That thing belongs in a zoo." "Funny," I said, grinning. "I was thinking the same about you." She gasped, but before she could fire back, Daniel stepped forward, clipboard in hand. He started with the chicken coop, where the hens pecked at their feed without a care in the world. Then he moved to the cows, who barely glanced up from their cud chewing. The sheep blinked at him lazily, their uneven wool looking perfectly natural to anyone who'd ever seen a sheep before. Everything was going smoothly, until Max decided to join the party. While Daniels crouched to inspect the water trough, Max crept up behind him, silent as a shadow. Lisa spotted him first and yelped, but it was too late. Daniels turned just as Max lowered his neck, spread his wings, and unleashed an ear-splitting honk right in the officer's face. The clipboard went flying, and Daniels scrambled backward, arms flailing. "What the?" he shouted, stumbling to his feet. Lisa shrieked. "I told you. That thing's insane." I couldn't hold it in anymore. I laughed. "Max doesn't like snoops. He's just doing his job." Daniels exhaled sharply, brushing dirt off his uniform. He gave Max a wary look, then turned to Lisa. "Ma'am, the animals look healthy. No signs of neglect or violations here." Lisa's mouth dropped open. "What? Are you blind? That goose just attacked you. And the sheep, they're suffering." Daniels glanced at the sheep again, now sprawled in the shade like they were on vacation. "Ma'am, the sheep are fine." Lisa's face turned red. "This is outrageous. I demand you file a report. I'll take this to the county if I have to." Daniels sighed, clearly done with her. "I'm not filing a report for a farm in perfect condition." That's when Lisa made her next move. She stormed toward the barn, determined to find something, anything, to pin on me. Max, of course, wasn't having it. The second she stomped past him, he spun around and launched himself at her like a feathered missile. She screamed, bolting for the barn, Max hot on her tail, honking like a deranged siren. I stood there with Daniels, watching in stunned silence as Lisa hit a muddy patch. Her fancy shoes slipped, and with one final flail, she crashed face first into a puddle of wet, sticky mud. Time seemed to slow as she lay there, dazed, before pushing herself up, her hair plastered to her face, her clothes soaked in filth. "Yikes," I said, whistling low. "That looked rough." Lisa turned to me, seething. "I'm going to sue you." Daniels rubbed his temples. "Ma'am, you trespassed, ignored warnings, and got chased by a goose defending its home. If anything, you could face charges." Her eyes widened, but before she could argue, she let out a guttural scream and stomped off, dripping mud with every step. She threw herself into her car and sped away, tires kicking up dust. Daniels shook his head. "I've seen some wild complaints, but this takes the cake." "Welcome to my life," I said, grinning. "No violations here," he said, climbing into his truck. "Keep that goose fed, he's earned it." Max honked victoriously as Daniels drove off. I glanced down at him, preening his feathers like a noble warrior. Something told me Lisa wasn't done yet, but for now, peace was restored. The next few days were blissfully quiet. No sign of Lisa, no clipboard-waving tantrums. It was almost too good to be true, and deep down, I knew it was. Lisa wasn't the type to let a goose, or anyone, get the upper hand. She was plotting, and when she struck, it'd be a storm. That storm hit one evening as I sat on the porch, watching the sunset. My phone buzzed with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "You think you can get away with this?" Lisa's voice screeched through the speaker. "You humiliated me, you and that demonic bird." I winced, pulling the phone away. "Lisa, how'd you get my number?" "That doesn't matter," she snapped. "I've spoken to the county board and sent video evidence of the dangerous conditions on your farm. Just wait, they'll see how aggressive that goose is. You're finished." I sighed, rubbing my temples. "You mean the same county board that ignored your last 5 complaints?" They won't care about a goose being a goose. She laughed, a sharp, unhinged sound. This time's different. I doctored the footage to show your precious Max as a threat to public safety. Let's see how they feel about a vicious attack on an innocent civilian. My eye twitched. Did you just admit to faking evidence? Silence. Then, hastily, that's not the point. You won't be laughing when animal control takes your monster away. She hung up. I shoved the phone in my pocket, my mind racing. Falsifying evidence. That was a new low, even for Lisa. If she thought I'd sit back and wait for her to ruin me, she was dead wrong. The next morning, I got to work. I called the county office, calmly explaining the situation, then rang a tech-savvy friend, Jake, who could spot a fake video from a mile away. By the time Lisa's evidence reached the county, Jake had dissected it, every sloppy edit, every bad splice, proving it was a sham. When Daniel showed up later that day, he looked exhausted. Let me guess, I said, leaning on the fence. Lisa sent you? He nodded, flipping through his clipboard. Yeah, with a video that was interesting. By interesting, you mean fake? He smirked. That's more accurate. The county board dismissed it as fraudulent. But here's the kicker. Falsifying evidence is a serious offense. She's crossed a legal line. I raised an eyebrow. Actual consequences? Yep, he said. The county's pressing charges for fraudulent reports, and she's got a trespassing warning. One more step on your land, and she's arrested. I whistled. Well, damn. Didn't see that coming. Case closed, Daniel said, heading to his truck. Tell your goose to take it easy. No promises, I called as he drove off. Lisa never showed her face that day. Word later got around. She'd been hit with a fine and a probationary ban on filing complaints without proof. It was poetic justice, and for the first time in months, I felt real relief. Life settled back into its rhythm after that. The animals went about their days, the sun rose and set, and Lisa's absence was a gift. But Max? He became more than just my guard goose. He became a legend. Word of his exploits spread. People stopped by to see the fearless goose who took down a Karen. Someone made a meme, Max chasing Lisa captioned, Farm Justice, and it went viral. Soon, there were t-shirts, stickers, even a short documentary about the bravest guard goose alive. Max, oblivious to his fame, kept patrolling, terrorizing trespassers, and stealing corn from the chickens. One evening, as I sat on the porch, Max waddled up beside me. He fluffed his feathers, let out a satisfied honk, and settled at my feet. I scratched his head. You did good, buddy. He honked again, eyes half closed, and I smiled. No matter how many Lisas came along, one truth held firm. Max ruled this farm. And as long as he was here, no one would stand a chance.